Hi, welcome back to our series, Rooted, a series that we are getting to talk to our ministerial wives. And you know, the reason we wanted to do this is we wanted to give you an opportunity to get to know these women who serve our church so well, because their husbands serve our church so well. And so today I am excited we get to have Mary Royal with us. Many of you probably know Mary because she spent over 35 years in our church, which is really kind of amazing to be able to season so much of your life within one church. But there are going to be so many things that you guys are going to learn about Mary that I think will really just bring a little bit more understanding to who she is and the ministry that she has here at the church. Mary is married to Jerry, who's our executive pastor, and they have served together on the church staff. Well, I guess Mary's not actually on the church staff, but Jerry's on the church staff for about 27 years. So just a long legacy of great leadership here. Mary has 4 kids. They range from elementary school all the way through college. And so she's still in the thick of raising kids, as well as learning to let them go and to pretty much launch them. So it's been really exciting. I'm so thankful that she is here. So Mary, welcome to Rooted.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And I want you to just start off, just tell us a little bit about your background as far as your family, the people that you grew up with, how many brothers and sisters you have, and just maybe some things that people wouldn't necessarily know.
Awesome. So Ann's right. We have been at this church for a long time, which is really different for ministry. Most people that Jerry and I are friends with in ministry have moved and had to move their families. So I always tell people it's really different to serve at a church for a super long time. You just don't see it a whole lot. So for us, that's been a huge blessing. For the church people, I don't know, they get really tired of you, I'm sure. But for us to be able to build our family, their roots here and all, that's been awesome. So I actually was born in Wichita Falls, which also makes it unique to be born in the town where you serve in your church. And so that's been a lot of fun. I'm the middle of 5 kids. So
Like the exact middle.
The exact
right?
middle. So all you middle children out there, we got to hold strong together. I have an older sister, an older brother, and then 2 younger sisters.
Okay.
So, and mom and dad live here still. And so that's been super great to have my kids and be able to have grandparents in town. And so those are all the great things of being in a place for a long time. So I did move away to go to college and moved away to go to grad school. But other than that, I ended up meeting Jerry, and he was serving here and came back and served at my home church. So it's definitely unique.
That is great. So you graduated from Rider, is that right?
I did.
And during your time at Rider, I think you have a really kind of a funny story to tell us because it's, go ahead, you tell it.
Yeah, before gender differences became popular. So when I was in high school, some of you, we took driver's education as a class. So it was a whole semester long. That's why I'm such a great driver, because we went from one whole semester at
I'm sure Jerry can attest to that.
Yeah, I'm sure
His
he
safety
would say
Sam.
that for sure. So I did, and at the very end, the DPS guy was going to come out and give us our permit so that we could actually drive, and I had to have my birth certificate, and so my mom had given it to me that morning, and I guess it was my very first time in life to ever look at my birth certificate. So as I was just studying it while he was calling everyone up, I realized that my name was on there, that I was born at Bethania Hospital in Wichita Falls, but that I was a male. That was my gender, and I was like, whoa. I mean, you can imagine as a 15-year-old panicking about being a male. So
I have identity issues. I didn't even know I had identity issues.
Now all of it's coming together for me. I mean, it all came together in one moment right then of all the problems. So I came home and told mom, and she's like, no. And so we had to change it in Austin and pay for it ourselves to change it.
I think it's a big pain, isn't it, to do?
It took almost a year to do. So, but I am now officially a female. And so anyways, funny story.
Oh, that's so funny. Those are those things you just can't make up,
You can't.
Good memories. Okay, so I know you mentioned that you went away to college. And,
yes.
But tell us a little bit about your own ministry call. Because I think a lot of times people will think that a ministry family, everyone is called to ministry, which I don't necessarily know that's true. But you had a specific individual call. And when did that happen, and kind of what did that look like?
Yeah, so very true. Although I always tell people I never had a specific call, and I think that's what makes all of our stories different. God speaks in different ways. He speaks through the wind. He speaks through loud things. And for me, it's always been very quiet, very subtle. And so for Jerry, it was a specific moment in time, So I remember, I always tell people about my call in ministry. It was progressive, and I don't know if any of you've ever done Henry Blackaby's Experiencing God. It was kind of that first manual, that first thing. And, he talks about the spiritual markers.
Right.
And he has you kind of identify those spiritual markers. And that was so great for me because I began to kind of see God's faithfulness in your life, and I began to see that there was a lot of markers that he used in my life, but this one is so vivid for me. And I was a child. I don't know how old I was, but I was in elementary school because I was at Vacation Bible School. And someone was talking about missions. You know how they would have someone come and talk about being a missionary. And they would always show people like Corrie ten Boom, and my vision of a missionary was like an older woman with a bun on top of her hair with gray hair.
Perfect.
And I think this might have been the lady that was talking. And I went to a camp as a kid that was very conservative, and those were what the women looked like,
Right. Did they have smocks on,
Yeah,
like long
exactly.
dresses? And
I remember in that moment, I don't know how to say this because I was a child, and I don't remember God audibly speaking, but I remember this person talking about missions and being a missionary. They'd come to speak, and I remember somehow me thinking that is what I'm going to do. And I remember as a child thinking, there's no way I'm wearing a bun on top of my head and going to another country. But as God began to work in my life as a teenager and then on into young adulthood, he just provided for me in ways of ministry. And as I began to solidify that calling through people that helped me in my spiritual journey, I began to realize that I was going to do ministry of some sort. It was not going to be in another country. That was not how God was going to use mine. And so I really loved meeting with girls, and so I would always meet with high school girls, and then I went on to graduate school and worked in collegiate ministry and worked with college kids. So the journey that God was taking me on before I met Jerry was ministry for me. I was getting a master's in marital and family counseling and just trying to decide and flesh that out. So I always try to encourage people. I would meet girls along the way that would say, God told me I was going to marry a minister. And I just thought, man, that never happened for me. I knew in my heart of hearts that God wanted me to somehow serve him vocationally. I just didn't know what that would look like. So I just walked in the doors that he opened for me. That's kind of how I did it. And it kind of landed me in collegiate ministry, and had another opportunity to serve at a college in Canada. And that's when Jerry and I we kind of intersected and decided to get married. And that was a big decision for me because I really saw myself going and being independent and doing ministry on my own. And I knew he was here, and that's my hometown. And
I wasn't where you wouldn't want to be. Like, I don't want to go serve in my own.
I was in Southern Florida. I could go to Canada, college in Canada, or Wichita Falls. So again, just knowing that we constantly tell our kids this, that God, for me, he works through provision, just what he provides in his providence, and just trusting that and having voices around me to help confirm that. So, I always say God chose to fulfill my calling to ministry by marrying a minister. I never thought that in a million years. I never thought I would marry a minister.
Because you and Jerry actually broke up, right? During your relationship?
Yes. So we dated, and then I ended up deciding to go on and move away and go to graduate school. I wasn't at a place I wanted to get married. Then he wasn't at a place he wanted to get married. And so we just decided, you know what, let's take a break. Yeah. I'll move to Southern Florida, move to West Palm Beach. And it was about 8 months after he was like, we need to get married. And it was just kind of, we needed that time to do that. So, just I don't know. I hear some people's journey. It's like, man, that makes so much sense. For me, it is just a trust. It's always been that constant theme of waiting on God, then trusting that he's really going to come through for you in that last minute moment. So for me, ministry, he chose to do that through marrying a minister and then us serving in a church. But I don't believe that's for everybody, know. And I met plenty of ministers' wives along the way that weren't called to ministry.
Sure.
And
they're called to minister to their husband and to serve their husband, but not serve vocationally.
That's right.
So, I think that's what makes you a little bit different is that you very much have a specific personal call even before meeting Jerry. Because I think for me, I always thought growing up in a minister's family that I would marry a minister and that would be what my ministry looked like.
Yes.
And so to be called into ministry personally without it being through being married to a minister and through that was really different for me.
Yeah.
So, but like you said, just kind of coming to peace with what the Lord has for your plan, letting him write your story, you know, not I keep trying to take his pen, you know, and just letting that story come out the way he wants it to be in our lives.
And I think that's something you and I will talk more about it in a minute. We were talking about is it seems like you wanted to live my story and I wanted to live your story in so many avenues of life. And that's so interesting because, again, it's just allowing God to write our story for us, because sometimes when we get all these ideas and you know, it's we're not really trusting him. So it's just that waiting, pausing, and then just allowing him to provide. But it's not easy.
No, it's not. And just trusting that he knows best. So you guys served in student ministry for how long were you doing student? 20 years?
So yeah, when I moved back and Jerry and I got married in '96, he had already been here for about 2.5 years, almost 3. And then we served 17 years in student ministry here, and then he transitioned.
And what's really cool is probably a lot of you that have young kids went through Mary and Jerry student ministry. So now you're getting to, you get to see kind of the fruit of your labor.
So cool.
But then Jerry transitioned out. And so when Bob came and he became executive pastor, how was that transition? Because really you and Jerry had walked side by side in ministry. And that call that God had put in your life was very much fulfilled by getting to work together in student ministry. Then Jerry's called to something different that really is more individual.
Yes.
What was that like?
Our marriage collapsed in a way. You know, it was, obviously we survived, but like you said, we served side by side. And it just was some of the sweetest years of our life. I mean, we just poured our heart and soul into teenagers for 17 years, started having our own family. We had kids over every Monday night for 17 years and, you know, just loved that. We loved our life. We loved going to camps. We loved mission trips. We loved, you know, all the things that student ministry entailed. And it just became such a natural fit for he and I. And we loved our staff and poured into our interns together. And just, you know, it took a lot of time to build. It wasn't something that happened overnight, but it was something that we poured our life into.
Sure. So it was very fulfilling.
Absolutely.
And you're very gifted in that.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think those all kind of fall into that.
And we just loved doing it together. It was very natural. So when Jerry, and we knew towards the end that student ministry was probably not something that we would not stay in forever and have a family, because I always tell people I've been to more C-team volleyball games in junior high than I care to ever go to. And when your own kids start playing team volleyball, it's time to not go to student ministry volleyball games. So we knew that having kids, we would, and a family and life getting busier, and we were getting older, and that we probably would transition out of that. So when Bob came and decided to transition the staff and asked Jerry to be in the role he is, it was a natural yes. I mean, we saw that. We thought we would probably leave and go somewhere else and serve, and that's just not what God had. So we were very excited about the transition. We just didn't realize that we had been doing ministry together for so long and that this position would not require a team together. So I think Jerry really fumbled and I really fumbled of just trying to figure out, you know, and I know you and I've talked so much about you're so gifted with women and teaching God's word to women, and I would try to do that and just go, it's not really my passion. And I felt like God had kind of closed the door for student ministry. So those years were hard on our marriage.
Fumbling.
Yeah, just trying to figure out, and kids are getting bigger, and I'm kind of the college plan, so how are we going to send them to college?
So what did you do? How did you kind of...
So we had lots of conversations together about what that looked like, and, you know, what am I going to do? And, you know, I taught some, and I do enjoy teaching God's word. It just wasn't where my heart was. And so I really stepped out of ministry. I mean, just wasn't doing a whole lot of ministry, busy with kids. And I guess it's been almost 5 years ago. This summer, it's been 5 years ago, I got a call from a lady that used to be on staff here at First Baptist, and said, Mary, there's a position open at the place where I'm executive director, and it's a position called forensic interviewing. It's at a child advocacy center, and I know you, and I think you might be really good for the position or gifted for it. Was this something you'd be interested in? I'm just trying to plan out. The girl we have here is probably going to be leaving, and it was so new to me. I didn't even know what I had no idea.
Was that even on your radar at all?
I mean, didn't know what it was, had no idea. So she said, we were actually on vacation that summer, and she said, when you get back in town, call me, let's talk. So I did, and Jerry and I began talking about it, and it is something that we had been praying towards, me going back to work and transitioning back into a career. And so I did, and just another time in my life, the Lord just said, this is what you're going to do. and just never saw myself doing that, even though my background is psychology and counseling and social work. This is very different. So Patsy's House is a child advocacy center. There's 76 in the state of Texas. And so it's a place where anytime a report of child abuse, whether that's physical abuse, sexual abuse, child witnesses to crimes, anything a child is credible in telling a story, I interview those kids for that. And so it's a child-led interview. It's me trying to get them to tell in their own words what or if something has happened to them. So something I'd never, ever done before. And of course, being in ministry for so long, you've heard so many stories.
Sure.
I mean, you've talked to so many people and you know a lot of things. And Jerry and I always say in ministry, sometimes you think, oh, we've heard everything. And then you hear another story and you're like, nope, hadn't heard that
Just
one yet.
kidding.
So I really prayed about it because I remember coming home and going, Jerry, I don't know if I can do this. I mean,
it sounds like you'd hear some really dark,
yes,
horrible
absolutely.
things.
Yes.
I mean,
and no counseling. I mean, there's no counseling. There's no
Right.
help. I mean, my job is to get the facts to try to find out so that this can go to court if it needs to and that it can stand up in a court of law.
Okay.
So it's just very different than anything I've ever
so
done.
that's the progression. You interview the child,
Yes.
and then that interview would
Goes
go
back into the detective's
basically as
hands.
evidence?
Yes, as
Okay.
evidence. And so,
Okay.
and it is admissible in a court. So if it does go, if it's found to be true and it does go into court, then I testify in court on behalf
So
of
you
the
actually
person
go
convicted.
and
Yes.
would be sitting in the same courtroom as possibly
Yes.
the people that are being
Yes.
accused of these things.
Yes. So I always tell my boss, Denise, I say, if I would have known about court, I would have absolutely said no to the job. And she told me about court, but you never know it till you actually go.
Sure.
I've never really done anything like that. I'd never, of course, never been on the stand. So just so many insecurities and so many things I was able to see, having to trust the Lord on. And it's been so great for me. I mean, the Lord I feel strengthened a lot of things in me that were not, I didn't even know that were weak.
Right.
And learning how to listen, is a skill to listen to people talk.
Because what do you have to do? What are those? We talked about a little bit. You've got some
Yeah.
traits that you really need to do in order to be a good forensic insect.
So the interview is not long. I
Okay.
mean, anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, and not usually an hour. Usually, typically, try to keep them shorter than that. So, it's really important to be able to build that rapport quickly. I mean, that's really a skill that you either have or you don't.
Right. Because you want the child to trust you,
Yes.
to be able to talk to you.
Yes. So building that rapport quickly, and I think those are some of the things that Denise is an interviewer too, and she's amazing, way better than I am. And so I was able to learn from her. And so I think those are some of the intangibles she saw, that
Right.
you just, you have or you don't. I think ministry helps with that because we talk to so many people. Learning how to build that rapport quickly, and then learning how to listen and learning how to ask the right questions, not asking questions that are leading or would cause them to say something that, wouldn't be true. And so we do training for that. So
Sure.
So
Well,
anyways,
I
I've
do
been doing
know,
that for
sitting
5
at
years.
different tables with you, Mary has an incredible knack of getting everyone's life story in like 5 minutes. It's amazing. So I
Well-
do think that is part of God's gifting in
Yeah.
your life, of just being able to build that rapport.
Yeah.
And people trust you and they're drawn to you. And I think people will share their story. So it's so interesting, though, that the Lord has taken this route in your
Yes.
life.
Yes.
Like you said, never would have imagined it.
No. And, I have to tell myself constantly, because again, having that call to ministry, I tend to look at this and go, oh, is this really ministry? I don't share the word in my job. I mean, obviously with the people I work with, but just learning that this is a piece to advocate for children.
Sure.
It's a piece of the puzzle. I'm a piece of it. I'm not the whole thing. I'm not even the biggest component. But that small piece to be able to hear a kid's story for the first time and believe them is really powerful. But I have to tell that to myself because, I never saw myself that would be the avenue that God would kind of steer my life in, to be able to do. So I love that I get to be advocate for kids. I love to talk to kids,
Right.
So my days in student ministry were super helpful for that, to be able to sit and talk and also know when a kid is yanking your chain, and
Exactly.
having your own kids. So that's been good. But, just that speaking the truth to yourself over and over, like, okay, this is where the Lord has me. And one of the things we talked about was happiness. What is happiness to me? Happiness is being content with where God has you, knowing He could change it.
Right.
I'm in the Old Testament reading right now, and just He can change people in a day. But
Right.
so understanding that if He's not changing circumstances, then this is where He has me, and learning to accept that. And
Exactly. Well, and I love that you said that you feel like you're an advocate for kids, because I think you see that in student ministry. in your job, and then you and Jerry walk through really foster care, kind of wanting to be the quintessential foster parent. Come to our house, be a part of the royal family for a few months.
Yes.
We'll launch you into the world and life will be great.
Oh, man.
And, you know, I think that's where we got to be so close is we were walking the same journey. I had such a different view. I could have cared less about foster care. My heart was set on adoption.
Yes.
And like you said before, our stories reversed.
Yes.
So just tell us a little bit about the process of fostering and adopting Kayla, who now is
9.5.
9.5. That's amazing. I
know.
remember being there the first day when she came into your house.
Yeah, so that's coming up May 23rd. We were just talking about it. So she's been with us for 7 years. And exactly like you said, so Jerry and I have 3. We have Maddie that is 21, Mallory's 19, and Kip is 15, about to be 16.
Biological.
They're our biological kids. I really felt a calling to foster care. I guess Kip was probably 4 or so. And God began to tug on my heart about it. And so I'd kind of mentioned it to Jerry, and we talked a little bit about adoption, and he was just like, you know, I'm very neutral on adoption. And you know, adoption, it's one of those things that you see people that are super like, I want to adopt.
Absolutely.
And then people are like, I could never adopt. And then people that are, I don't know, I'm just kind of neutral. He just was like, I'm very neutral. And I kind of felt the same way. I don't know, I never really had processed it. And so we were very much like, fostering, like you said. I'm like, gosh, let's bring these people in. I love the idea of talking to birth parents. You know, you not so much.
You definitely had that rosy colored picture, like we're gonna love them and they're gonna launch and they're gonna love the Lord. They're gonna look back at their lives and go, we spent this time in the Royals. And I love that.
Absolutely.
That just was not my heart.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I wanted. And so, you know, that again was a whole 3-year process of even getting our family on the same page. And it wasn't a big deal then like it is now. Not that it's a big deal, but lots more people are fostering and you're kind of getting a little bit more.
Right, there's more of a community, I think.
Yes, a community. And when we started, we didn't know anyone that was fostering. So we just called CPS and literally went down there and went to a training, and Presbyterian Children's Home actually was the one that was representing that night. And we listened, Jerry and I listened, and left with the whole idea of, we can't do this. I mean, this is going to be so strapping on our family. Our own bio kids can't even keep the kids. And we were on the go all the time. This wouldn't work. So kind of left there like this is too much red tape, you know, too much. And God just didn't let it go. I mean, he just never let it go. So through another series of events, actually a girl that was in our ministry that was on Campus Crusade Ministries, they were missionaries in Egypt. They were here. We had lunch with them. And God really used that moment with Tara of her talking about how hard that was. And she was going back. And I was like, well, why are you going back? And she's like, this is what God's called us to. There's, you know, I got to go back. And in that moment of walking out, like, I know God has called me to foster care. I have no idea what that looks like. I don't even know. I just know that is what he's called me to. So I told Jerry, I have to call. We have to go get the training, get the licensing, whatever that looks like. And he was like,
taking the next step.
Taking the next step. And he's always been so supportive, like, go for it. If that's what you want to do, I'm there. Now, dragging him to the classes was a different story, but we did it, we got it. But that was a whole 3-year process of doing that. And, you know, I mean, you and I've talked about so much. Our story is so different because we truly wanted to foster kids, give them back, have other foster kids. And Kayla was our first placement. So, and, you know, she came to us in May of 2013. And she was 2 years and 9 months old and only spoke about 5 words. And they called us a couple of weeks later, you know, do you think there's a chance that you would want to adopt her? Because we were not a legal risk home at the time, and they wanted to get her into a legal risk home in case adoption happened. And the answer was absolutely. I mean, so again, those very few things in life, I look back when I talk about those spiritual markers and see God's faithfulness. Ministry is a marker. God has just said, this is what you're going to do. You know, Patsy's house was this is what you're going to do. And Kayla was that for us.
Right.
And so the interesting thing about those things that God just basically said, here's a little girl from Crowell, Texas, and she's going to become a royal and she's going to live with y'all. The beauty of that is that part is so easy. Mary, you're going to work at Patsy's house. You know, Mary, you're going to go into ministry. So I don't have to question those things. Like, this is what you're going to do.
Right.
But those three things have been the three hardest things I've probably ever done.
To actually flesh out the
Yes.
day-to-day.
Yes. They've been the things that have been the hardest on my marriage. They've been the things that have been the hardest to trust God in, to see what the future holds. And just having a little kid come and live with you that you didn't get the first 3 years of your life
Sure.
is something that I'd never experienced. And still to this day wonder what I'm doing and if I'm doing
very
things
humbling.
right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, we adopted her a year and 2 months after that. So it was about 14 months before the adoption was final. And so, and that's when you and I became close in the whole foster care journey, because it truly is one of those things that unless you've done it, it's hard to understand the emotions and understand the roller coaster of. And so watching you go through your losses in that was so painful, and then watching me go through my losses in that of what's going to happen. It truly is such a picture of the Lord, I think. And I think that's why he loves adoption so much, because it is such a picture of what he's done for us. But man,
it is messy.
It's so messy. And I say, there's just something very unnatural about thinking you're a parent of somebody that is not your biological child. There's not a lot of natural in that. So you have to really trust the Lord to bring that naturalism to it.
Right. But I love that still the Lord has so instilled in both you and Jerry that you are an advocate.
Yes.
You are the biggest advocate for Kayla.
Yes.
And I'm excited to see kind of what that future will look like. Well, as we wrap up, the last question I always want to ask is just the reason we call this series Rooted is because I feel like it is so important. I think we all have things that get us through life that are just that foundation. When everything else falls apart, it's where we land. And so that is what has rooted us. So for you, thinking back through all of these, experiences in your life, through all these spiritual markers, for all of this, what would you say has really rooted you and just giving you that foundation?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. And as I thought back about it, I think for sure is just that learning how to preach the truth to myself, I didn't know what I was doing early on, but God's word became so important, and I had it from such an early age, which I'm so grateful for.
Sure.
But being able to speak the truth to myself. Nobody else. My voice is louder than anyone else's voice. Louder than Jerry's, louder than my family of origin, louder than the people I work with, louder than my kids. What I say to myself really empowers me. And so learning that has been a life journey of learning how to say the right things, what God says, who he thinks I am, who he's called me to be, who he wants me to be in this time. So I think that is what's rooted me. I mean, it's what I've fallen back to in the hardest times of my life, in the darkest days of wondering, how is this all going to work out? Well, God says that it's going to, and I've got to trust him in that. And then he says this is where he has me. So I think for sure for me, it is that learning to preach the truth or the gospel. I mean, just that this is who God says I am, and I've got to trust this. But man, it's hard to live by.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I do think it is that foundation that you go back to when the whole world feels like it's cratering. Yep. Is that, and that God is in control. We've talked about this too. Tell me your favorite mantras. God is in control. He's good.
Yeah.
God is good. And
he's got this.
Yeah. And I do think that comes from growing up in a family that loved the Lord. And I think that is one of the benefits of that. So Mary, thank you for being here.
So fun.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed this time. Just kind of getting to know a little bit more about Mary. And if you don't know about her, she does love to drink Cokes. So that was one of my questions. I was going to ask her where's her favorite place to get a Coke. But
it's bad.
Those are the deep theological questions we were going to talk about. But anyway, y'all have a great day. Thanks for joining us.